President Buhari held his last Federal Executive Council meeting before the presidency ends. In his speech, President Buhari emphasized the significance of teamwork and the need for continuity in governance. A day before, the outgoing president approved over 17 billion naira for power projects across the country, but he did not dissolve his cabinet today, instead directing his ministers to return to their offices and continue working. State House correspondent Adeso Marwa reports.
It is the last meeting for them here at the council chambers as members of the Federal Executive Council. The president expressed his gratitude to the ministers for their unwavering commitment in pursuing the goals of the administration. He also called for support and cooperation for the incoming administration.
I am proud to say we gave governance our best. For those of us that will not directly be in government, I know I'm one of such. I ask that we continue to provide our support in whatever way we can. I look forward to a great many of you. It is proven that Daura has not become too distant because I am no longer Mr. President.
With deliberations holding behind closed doors, away from the lenses of our cameras, the Minister of Information reveals the valedictory meeting served as a platform for introspection, providing an opportunity for the ministers to share their final thoughts, express gratitude, and reflect on their collective achievement over the past 8 years.
Generally, I think it was just a glorious moment for all the ministers to thank the president, thank their colleagues, and also give gratitude to God that a journey that started in 2015 is ending, very well in 2023.
Staying true to its commitment to work till the final days, ministers briefed journalists of the outcome of an extraordinary meeting of cabinet held on Tuesday. One of the key decisions made was to establish a system that minimizes discretion exercised by lawyers and standardize contract procedures to protect the interests of the country.
When we came into office, we inherited an arbitral award liability of around $10 billion against the federal government arising from a purported breach of a contract which is popularly known as P&ID. And then our assessment of the contract is the fact that a lot of discretion on the part of the lawyers responsible for vetting federal government contract was tolerated, which discretion now resulted in some level of overlooking of the major clauses that could have, at the end of the day, provided some level of protection to the interests of the federal government.
The council also approved contracts aimed at improving the country's database. It will also see banks provide citizens with a debit card which doubles as a national identity card. Additionally, the Ministry of Power got contract sums over 17 billion naira, while an economic empowerment policy for women was approved.
As it stands today, the NIN and SIM policy registration is being implemented. In order to consolidate the implementation, the Nigerian Communications Commission comes up with a proposal that will enhance the implementation of the policy and bring many more benefits to it. These benefits are, number one, it will sanitize the database. Number two, it is going to be automated. Number three, it will make the process of SIM replacement much easier for our citizens and legal residents.
With barely 5 days before the curtain falls on his tenure, President Buhari also took time to meet with the members of the State House staff.
I thank you very much for tolerating us as a government, and especially tolerating me as a leader. I assure you that I try to lead myself with a clear conscience, in the sense that whatever is constitutional, that is your right according to the conditions of service, this government hasn't cheated you.
It is a race against time here at the presidential villa as President Muhammadu Buhari's tenure draws to a close. Although it is the last Federal Executive Council meeting of the outgoing administration, the cabinet is yet to be dissolved by the president, who asked his ministers to return to their desk, tidy up their work, and avoid last-minute rush. Barely 5 days to go. Perhaps the cabinet will be dissolved at the official handover of transition document to the incoming administration on Thursday. From the presidential villa, Abuja, Adesua Omoran for Rise News.
Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari is asking the Senate to approve payments of judgment debt in 3 different denominations of Naira, US dollars, British pound sterling, totally 704 billion. President Buhari is in the approval request letter read on the floor of the Senate by Vice President Ahmed Lawan and said promissory notes will be issued for payment of the debt owed by the federal government over the years.
I wish to request the Senate to kindly consider and approve through its resolution the settlement of the top priority judgment debts and general judgment debts incurred by federal MDS in the sum of USD 566,754,584 dollars 31 cents, 281,801,881 naira 64 kobo through the issuance of promissory notes. The Honorable Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice and the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning shall provide any information that may be required by the Senate for the consideration of this request.
Right. Yep. So there's a lot that has to be talked about.
Welcome back, Rufai. Good to see you this morning.
Oh yeah, still trying to get my accent
together. Hope you're feeling better.
Still woozy a bit, but yeah.
Right. Okay, so goodbye is the loneliest word, I know, according to that song by Ruby Mori. And it's time to say goodbye for the Buhari administration as we count down to the inauguration of the president-elect and the vice president-elect on Monday, the 29th of May 2023. We've seen the valedictory Federal Executive Council meeting presided by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria for the next 4 days. And as expected, and as reported excellently by Adesua Omoran, a number of items were addressed, especially the opportunity for ministers, and other political appointees to give their valedictory speech to the president, thanking him for time spent. But beyond the administrative part of the meeting, some of the key things that have come out of that, of course, are the last-minute approvals. As has been established a number of times, right from about a month to inauguration, we had raised the issue around the fact that there were some new or perhaps projects that had been pending that were approved, which had monetary or financial implications. And we asked the question around what was the merit of doing this a few days to the end of their tenure. Why not let the new administration come in to take charge of that and know how they want to spend monies? But we have again mentioned that government is supposed to be a continuum. And so what is expected is that whatever project is started in this administration continues with the next administration, hopefully. But one of the key things I would mention is that it seems there's a sense that the president is hoping to, as much as possible, in tidying up his desk, see if he can still tick some boxes that he promised Nigerians when he was campaigning to be their president. One of such I have to highlight is about women empowerment. During his campaign, the president had talked about the fact that he would have more women inclusive in his government. And whilst that might, there are debates around how well he has included women. I mean, he justified making a woman the Minister of Finance and Economy. But we see the women economic empowerment policy, which is touted to be a game changer in including women in financial planning. Beyond that are the other projects he had in terms of infrastructure and the likes. But I mean, towards the end of the tenure, we'll continue to see more consolidations in terms of trying as much as possible to leave the best legacy possible.
Dr. Batu?
Well, I mean, everything has an exit point.
Yeah.
And we are at that exit point for the Buhari administration. The Minister of Information yesterday was saying, oh, the cabinet has not been dissolved, that the ministers are still on duty. But what is clear, is that what was held yesterday was the last Federal Executive Council meeting of the Buhari administration. The president has directed that the ministers should stay at their desk and use the remaining hours to complete their assignment. Well, there will be Jumat service tomorrow. There will be a church service on Sunday. There will be pre-inauguration dinner. And then by midnight, May 28th, it's all over. And everybody will go home. Even the president himself has since moved, as reported, to a small corner of the villa, as is the standard practice. And of course, by now, as it happens, the villa will be a ghost town. You won't see so many movements around the place. But in any case, the valedictory session, yes, is an opportunity for ministers to give their farewell speeches. But what is, noteworthy is that in the last 3 Federal Executive Council meetings, this outgoing administration has been engaging in a flurry of activities. Last week alone, the Federal Executive Council considered over 60 memos, awarded contracts, and now yesterday we were told on the floor of the Senate that the outgoing administration is asking for approval for a total of 539 billion naira as judgment debts. Now, the judgment debts, whether we like it or not, from the federal ministries, departments, and agencies, government will have to pay at some point, okay? Because an agreement, a contract, or whether it's a general judgment debt or it is, promissory notes that government is talking about, the principle is pacta sunt servanda. Agreements must be kept. If a judgment is entered against you or you are a debtor in a particular way, the creditor is entitled to his money being paid. And if the debtor goes to court, they can ask for judgment interest. They can ask for post-judgment interest. What is curious again is that this request for this 539 billion has been on the table since March. Why is the federal government now just approaching the Senate? And the argument that has been pushed, and this is not an original thing by many people, specifically by Chief Afe Babalola in Ado-Ekiti yesterday, is that, look, we still have the $800 million that we have not resolved. Now government is asking for more money, and that he thinks it's not morally right for an undeclared bankrupt government to be asking for more money. And that's the position of many people. The second position that people have canvassed is that why not leave it to an incoming administration that will be there by next week? The next Federal Executive Council meeting next week will have a new set of people. If there are no ministers by then, if Bola Ahmed Tinubu does not hit the ground running, then maybe the week after you have new people who may have to reconsider many of these memos. And the third point that some people have raised is that judgment debts, sometimes is for racketeering. All these lawyers who are, consultants, going up and down the corridors of power for what they too can gain as consultants. So these are issues. They may be moral, but, these are the views that have been expressed by many people. But in any case, we are almost at the end of it. By Tuesday morning, there will be a new president in place, and there will be probably within a short while new ministers in place and new faces at the Federal Executive Council. Well, in the statement issued by Femi Adesina, the cabinet gave itself a pass mark, including those who have stayed in office and are suddenly at the last minute not happy with their position. I had one minister saying that the position of Minister of State is unconstitutional, and yet you occupy the position and enjoyed it. And the same minister is a senior advocate of Nigeria. So is he saying that his appointment is an illegal act and he benefited from illegality for something that is unconstitutional? A man that is supposed to be an officer in the temple of justice. I don't want to name names. Maybe he will go a step further and return all the benefits that he got from that, what he considers unconstitutional. So this is the kind of rhetoric we're getting. But Nigerians, have high expectations and hoping that the Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration, will start on a high note and, will address many of the challenges facing us in this country, one of which is security, insecurity. And since yesterday, we've been focusing on that particular subject. The second issue we're focusing on is also education.
Oh my God, where do I start from? Hey, President Muhammadu Buhari, you had your time. You are very privileged because it's a very small class of people that get a chance to run this country twice. Probably, I think, after Olusegun Obasanjo, you got your chance. You came as a military officer first, but now you're coming as a civilian. So thank God for it. This is your time, finally. But, sir, what you will leave with now would be your legacies. And please, be open to take it all in when people give their feedbacks. Because you see, there are many things you didn't see when you were in the seat of power that sycophancy will not allow you to see, which might not necessarily be your fault, but there were so many sycophants around you, as there are so many sycophants around anybody in power. And this advice goes by extension to the incoming president. Please limit sycophancy around you. But now you will see for yourself the hardship and the pain Nigerians are facing. You're not going to be covered by the walls of Aso Rock any longer. You're going to be there in your village, Jawara, and you're going to see pound for pound and measure for measure what Nigerians are facing. And probably, when you see it and you introspect and you discover your own mistakes, be glad to make peace with yourself. Because after all is said and done, you will still have to make peace with yourself. So I wish you the very best as you leave office. But the last Federal Executive Council meeting is just indication of what dogged your administration. The fact that a lot of things were not done properly. There was a lot of sycophancy everywhere. Why wait this late to be able to approach all these humongous judgment debts, which we all know largely is a scam? And for further reading about judgment debt, you can go and read Reformable, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala book. She revealed the judgment debt scam, how they do it, how ministries perpetrate this judgment scam with the contractors, how they are the ones that deliberately make the government default on the payment, and they advise the contractors how to go to court, what to do in court, and they get the judgment against the government they serve. And when the money is paid, they share it. You can go and read that book, Reforming the Irreformable, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. So it's crystal clear. In the space of a month before leaving, now we have close to over $1 trillion, because if you collect this $700 billion you're asking for, plus the $800 million, plus other monies here and there, a lot of amounts of money have been frittered away. And that's an indication of how the administration was. The argument you always make is that you did infrastructure. Yes, I give you kudos for doing some. But you see, the greatest indication of how much you have done is the question of, are the lives of Nigeria better before they came in, before you came in, and now that you're leaving? The stats show that the lives of Nigerians have gone worse under your administration. And these are the feedbacks. You will make peace with yourself when you take it. And I know when we interview you, or when we get a chance to interview you many months down the line or years down the line, you too will reckon that you could have done better. It is also reflective of what happens. That's why you hear a minister has the effrontery to now be moral and sanctimonious. But when he was enjoying the government largesse, Mr. Festus Keyamo failed to realize when they gave him the position, he could have said that was not constitutional. But now he's sermonizing and writing us a sermon that is not constitutional. Like Dr. Abati says, I think he should start by also returning all the salaries he got and all the contracts he oversaw, because I'm sure he was the one that oversaw that contract of giving jobs to how many thousand people all over the country? All right?
Yes.
The Cutlass contract. Oh. He oversaw that contract. So he should as well, not have taken that contract. And this talk about, Minister of State didn't get a chance to do everything. If he wanted to be a substantive minister, he could have lobbied or just asked for it. Or maybe he's telling the new administration he wants to be a substantive minister. Maybe if they give him, that's it. But this is like peeing on our backs and telling us it's raining. So is it that a senior advocate of Nigeria supported illegality, something against the Constitution, and supported a constitutional breach? and afterwards came back and said, oh, it was a constitutional breach, but I just had to take it. And I'm not complaining at all that you gave me the position, though, but it's against the law. I just want it for further jurisprudence in the future. Ha, 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 ha. Really funny indeed. After all is said and done, in the stillness of the evening, when the sun has had its day, we can hear a voice of whispering, come away, child. All of us will go back home someday. But the question is, what did we do on the way back home? President Muhammadu Buhari, happy retirement. The African Development Bank launched its 2023 Economic Outlook on day 3 of its ongoing annual meetings in Sharm el-Sheikh. The report delved into mobilizing private sector financing for climate and green growth in Africa. Our Rise business correspondent Rotu Diri sent in this report.
The African Development Bank annual meetings on day number 3 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, unveiled the highly anticipated African Economic Outlook 2023 report. The in-depth 222-page report delved deep into the economies of the nations of Africa and looked at challenges and opportunities and provided solutions and gave a forecast for the continent. Before the report was officially unveiled, Professor Kevin Chika Urama, Chief Economist and Vice President of the African Development Bank Group, gave a presentation with highlights from the report. On challenges facing the continent, Professor Urama highlighted a portion of the report that said debt vulnerabilities for Africa have been worsened by exchange rate depreciation and high primary deficits.
The third one, the second issue we need to raise in the macroeconomic fundamentals is the issue around debt. And we have all been talking about it. Debt vulnerabilities continues to worsen because of rapid exchange rate, depreciation, as I've already talked about, but also high primary deficits. Consumer price inflation.
On opportunities, the report said green growth is positively correlated with GDP growth and encouraged African nations to invest more in a green, climate-friendly future.
We find in the report that green growth positively correlates with GDP growth. It also correlates with climate resilience and climate readiness. So embarking on green growth, which is what we're all talking about, and climate resilient development can actually be a source of addressing the long-lasting development challenges on this continent.
With respect to forecasts, the report said global demand for electric vehicles is set to grow, and Africa is positioned to benefit based on its natural resources.
Here, you see that currently Africa focuses on mining and metals, but then precursor production of lithium-ion batteries and all things that is needed for electric vehicles. The higher you go on the value chain, the bigger the market size. So investing more to get Africa to that level is a great way to mobilize resources that we're talking about.
Following the presentation, there was a panel discussion with reactions to the report.
The opportunities, are there opportunities? Yes, according to the literature, there are trillions of dollars of opportunities. Third issue, is Africa well positioned? Yes, Africa is very well positioned with opportunities, and not only opportunities, with a competitive edge of the resources, of the human capital, and more important, which is just bluntly that top-bottom approach makes it easier to approach.
No, I think first of all, I'm super happy to see this enormous depth of analytics in this report. But actually what triggered my interest most was the combination of what is needed is innovation, scale, and the right risk mitigants. And as a banker, I thought these are exactly the sort of 3 words I like. And what I heard also now from, of course, the governor of the Egyptian Central Bank is what we need to do is get this mix of innovation risk return and scalability right to really attract the private sector at scale.
Despite multiplicity of shocks, we're still able to generate real GDP growth that is above the global average without having all the stimuluses and all these amazing safety nets that you see the rest of the world enjoying. So I think resilience has been highlighted very nicely, but what I also found very interesting is the scope to leverage natural capital. And for this report to be highlighting that in Sharm el-Sheikh, where COP27 took place, I think is very timely.
To be on this panel.
With an eye to the future, one of the panelists, Andrew Mitchell, UK Minister of State for Development in Africa, spoke about an upcoming UK-Africa summit, which will be attended by UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak.
Now, we want to make sure through this UK-Africa Investment Summit, which will be chaired by our Prime Minister next April, that we do everything we can to boost trade, investment and jobs throughout Africa, and that we boost trade with our own country, from our own country, driving up living standards. And that's why the Prime Minister has invited African leaders and businessmen to come to, and women to come to Britain next April.
The President of the African
And then it was time for the big unveil, which featured AFDB President Dr. Akinwumi Adesina.
Ladies and gentlemen, to unveil the 2023 African Economic Outlook Report from the African Development Bank Group. Yes, we've got one more copy being brought. There's one copy. Yes, there you go.
Analysts, economists, government officials, private sector players will be pouring through this in-depth report from the African Development Bank for insight and guidance. And us on the Arise News business desk, well, we love a good report. I mean, these graphs are absolutely gorgeous. Purchasing Managers Index, global commodity prices, global capital market indices, and real GDP per capita growth. I mean, if these graphs were human and female, I would take them out to a nice Egyptian restaurant and talk about the future of Africa. It brings to a close a very engaging day 3 at the African Development Bank annual meetings in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Rotus Odiri, Arise News.
All right, Rotus, I will not ask for bread that you brought from Egypt. All I'll ask for is that report. If I can just read it, Ayo.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think Rotus is ready to get married, because if he's fantasizing about taking a book on a report on a date, then something must be up. But day 3 of the AFDB annual meetings in Egypt, Sharm el-Sheikh, all eyes in terms of Africa and leaders, as well as, of course, governors of central bank. And like you mentioned, that report should be in the hands of as many as possible. I like how it's been broken down and what Rotus had talked about in terms of some of the challenges. We looked at debt vulnerabilities, especially with the foreign exchange shocks, and also with regards to the opportunities. And let me focus on that, because some of the things we don't talk about oftentimes are the opportunities that as a continent we haven't yet maximized, and where we can hopefully shore up so we can get more funding to help in building that sector. I talked about particularly our natural resources, which has helped in terms of the shocks across, the prevailing economic situation across the world. We look at the fact that Africa has about 40% of the gold of the world and other such. And it talks about how we can play in the electric vehicle value chain. I think that's something for investors, businessmen and women to look into.
Well, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, the president of the AFDB, talked about cautious optimism. If you look at the figures contained in that report, well, I don't know whether, there's a strong basis for that, cautious optimism. It looks bad on the surface of it. Growth is projected to be about 0.2%. in 2023 and 1.5% in 2024, even in the most industrialized economy in Africa. Average inflation we're told, is set to accelerate again this year to about 15.5%. That's on the average across Africa. GDP growth is below 4.8%. The last time many African countries, key African countries, recorded 4.8% expansion in their GDP was in 2021, according to that. And the debt to GDP ratio in Africa is expected to be 66% this year and 65% next year, and rise in domestic debt. So, you know, African countries, most of them are vulnerable, particularly in the southern part. But it raises a question about leadership. Leadership is the issue. And that report having been done, yes, we recommend wide circulation and hope that the economists, the analysts, the leaders in the various African countries will see something in that report that can be used as policy guide. And it's not for nothing I guess that you have many African leaders at that event and interacting, exchanging ideas. But if all of this, you know, do not translate into policy initiatives, into priorities for African leaders, then of course, you know, the purpose will not have been served. Average inflation rate of 15.5%. That's on the high side, although we keep hearing that there's no hard and fast rule about inflation. After all, the other day, a presidential spokesman told us that inflation is high in some other parts of the world, and that Nigerians should not worry, you know. But we hope, and I had given a report then, that I hope is that particular spokesperson is not dreaming that Nigeria should reach the 1,000 percentage points that some other countries have.
I'm sure probably they were dreaming that Nigeria will get to the inflation level of Zimbabwe.